Hey gang, Volty here bringing another post-match commentary. This is the other semi-finals from the Plenty of Games Winner Library event a little while ago. Unfortunately, on the day we lost the ability to do live commentary, so we're doing some filming after the fact. On the left-hand side, we have Justin Chung, who is playing Grixis without Lutri. On the right, we have Brandon Crawford on Lurrus Breach. So it's a pretty interesting matchup. Grixis has access to a fair amount of graveyard hate and quite a lot of stack interaction, but Lurrus Breach, unlike some of the other combo decks, does play quite a high density of threats in the Darcy and the Tamio, etc., and obviously has access to a companion, and notably one of the best ones, if not the best one, which does give it quite a lot of equity in the longer games. So here, players shuffling up and going into game one. We'll see what happens. If I remember the bracket, I believe Brennan has the option of play or draw here. In their quarterfinals, Brennan beat Shops in the hands of Tom Bott, and Juzza beat Billinghurst, I think it was, on walks. And yeah, Juzza does have the play here. Gonna start things off with a Verdant Catacombs and ship the turn back. Most likely a Sewers, but there is a little bit of interaction that he has access to here. Brennan gonna fire off a Mishra's Bauble to work out if he wants the top card, because he can alter the top card with Marsh Flats. Looks like he doesn't want it here. Okay, so Juzz are going to get a C and cycle Alorian for his Volk. So access to perfect mana here. Brennan has a draw lined up for Juzz's upkeep. Darcy put on the stack, going to be met by Misstep. This is one of the other notable things about the Breach deck. Because the combo requires so few cards to actually win the game, the deck is heavily interactive. Being in 4 colors, it has access to counter magic, discard spells, a couple of threats that have minor disruption. And here, the Inquisition sees Breach, Strix, Thought sees Duress, Spell Pierce, and a land. Probably not much reason to take a discard spell. Juzza pulls an EI to the front of his hand, so he might take Spell Snare. Almost never taking Strix. Not super likely to take Breach either. So I imagine it's between Spell Snare and a Thoughtseize here. Yeah, gonna take the Spell Snare to protect the AI. Makes sense. Brennan's Sewers not being able to cast Duress is quite relevant here. Also doesn't cast Baleful Strix, so Brennan effectively taking this turn off after he's lost his Spell Snare. Oh, and Juzza's going to put a DHA in play. That's pretty scary. Now, Brennan's last two draw steps have been super interesting. He hit an Entomb and then a Brain Freeze. And in conjunction with the Breach that's already in his hand, he pretty much has all the resources he might need to win this game. Now, in saying that, he has very little information to go off. Hasn't cast a Probe, hasn't cast a discard spell. So I imagine the next couple of turns are going to see the Thoughtseize and the Duress put on the stack here. Thoughtseize seeing EI, Nethergoyf, and some other shiny cards. I think it's a Drown, maybe? The Baleful Strix is threatening the DHA. It was a Drown. I think there's a Voidwalker in there. So if Juzza casts Inquisition off the DHA, it's currently dying to the Strix here. So we might see him fire off the EI. We might also see him cast Voidwalker. Notably, if he casts Voidwalker and then Inquisition and tags the Breach, it'll go to Exile, and Brennan won't be able to win the game with the combo game plan, and will have to win the game with resources. So he's going to have to trade a bunch of creatures, pick up Lurrus, stick Lurrus, probably try and get quite a lot of cards out of it. Because without Breach, the combo game plan, even with all the other bits and pieces like LED and Brain Freeze, none of them function without Breach. So I'm surprised Juzza didn't go for it here and taking just a more passive line. If he did go for Voidwalker plus Inquisition, he'd lose the DHA, and the Voidwalker wouldn't represent much. But at that point, it's just a mid-range mirror. And I guess Juzza would lose a bit of footing, because presumably the EI would be stranded in his hand and get duressed. And, I mean, beating a Lurrus isn't the easiest thing in the world. I think I disagree with the passive line. I think the aggressive line of Voidwalker, tag a Breach forever would just win the game often enough. Duress gonna miss here. Juzza's got a Fetch, a Nethergoyf, a Voidwalker, and a Pyrogoyf. So Pyrogoyf can tag the Strix, which will let DHA stick here. But I imagine he's gonna go sideways. The Inquisition is face up in the graveyard, so I don't think Brennan can buy Lurrus anytime soon. And here, Brennan's going to win the game. He's going to entomb the LED, he's going to cast the Breach, and because Juzza took a turn off to cast EI, he's dead. As simple as that. His hand is face up from Duress, and he's dead. Presumably we're going to see, a little bit of the motions, quote unquote. But Brennan does have all the actual pieces here. So he's going to Brain Freeze himself for a bunch, cast the LED to make some mana. And so if you don't know what this combo does, with Underworld Breach you get access to your graveyard, and you can cast spells from it by exiling 3 cards. But unlike something like Your Will, you have the ability to cast the same spells over and over again. So by casting LED multiple times, you can generate a lot of mana, and then by casting Brain Freeze with a high storm count, you get to refill your graveyard, which allows you to then continue casting spells with the Breach, until eventually you can Brain Freeze your opponent for their whole library. If for some reason they aren't dead to that, because they have some kind of Shuffle Eldrazi, or a Blightsteel Colossus, for example, then typically you would cast quite a lot of Lightning Bolts with the LED previously mentioned. So Brennan going to take game 1 here. Both players going to have access to a decent amount of sideboard options here. They both have access to 4 blasts. They might both bring in all 4 blasts. Juzza will have access to some graveyard hate. Brennan will have access to a couple of catch-alls to tag graveyard hate pieces, things like Rip Apart, etc. Yeah, I mean, I think Juzza was meant to win that game. Like, obviously Brennan had to draw a runner to just blow him up. But even then, playing the Voidwalker makes you so much more likely to not be dead. I expect Juzza to bring in probably about 8 cards here, and Brennan probably capped at about 5 or 6. We'll see if we can skip forward to the game starting again. Looks like it's somewhere around here. Alright, so player's gonna shuffle up for game 2. Juzza gonna have the play. Quite important here for the purpose of discard spells. This is one of the matchups where discard spells hitting other discard spells is actually pretty common. Playing with known information heavily favors the combo deck. If Juzza and Brennan both know each other's opponent's full hand, Juzza is definitely at a disadvantage. So discard spell, tagging discard spell, definitely not uncommon. In saying that, a lot of the threats in Lurrus Breach are very high value and can win the game by themselves, like Darcy and Tamio. So notably, discard spells only really hitting other discard spells when there isn't a premium threat. Alright, let's see what the players have got going on here. Both players going to keep Gloomlake Verge pass. I imagine Brennan is firing off a discard spell by the looks of it. Hand looks pretty interactive. Looks like Juzza has a Thought Scour in the top of the hand. pretty incentivized to cast Thought Scour and try to hit Misstep. But if you're not protecting anything and the Duress is going to hit Thought Scour, it does dodge the possibility of something else happening. I don't know, I think I like Thought Scour there and try and hit the 1 in 49 or whatever to hit Misstep. Because I think I would Misstep this Duress pretty much every time. Hand looks very creature heavy though. There's like a Bowmasters and an Emperor Bones. I'm going to Thought Scour after the Duress is resolved. So Jazza gets to go into his turn 2 with 2 unknown cards instead of 1 by waiting. I don't know how plus EV that is though. Playing the Bone Man and starting to work on the graveyard is enticing, but since it's the early turns, I think you're probably meant to hold up the Bowmasters and at least threaten an extra trigger. But he might just develop Bone Man here. Oh, he drew a Voidwalker. Okay. That's pretty big. That is definitely the best 2-drop he could have played there. Off that mana, anyway. Brennan gonna fire off a Portent here. Sees land, Pyroblast, Dreadfuge. Pretty much perfect. Although, I don't believe he has access to a kill. I don't think there was an intuition or anything. Gonna fire off a Dreams here. Presumably gonna tag the Bowmasters. I mean, it has to tag the Bowmasters because you're drawing a card in upkeep, right? So Jazza has Force, no blue card. Fetch land, Bone Man. And I mean, the Voidwalker's gonna do a bunch of damage. Looks like Jazza drew another land here. Gonna start working on the graveyard now. Yeah, that Duress is in exile, but in a different exile pile. I think we as a community do need to work out a better way to represent Voidwalker and the multiple exile piles that people have access to. Between Voidwalker, normal graveyard hate, things like Ren's Resolve, it's super easy to get like 4 exile piles. So we can see Brennan has a Molten Collapse. So he does have a clean answer to Voidwalker. Looks like he's debating whether he Molten Collapses this turn, or holds up a Reb, or develops something else. I haven't seen the full hand. What can he cast with Scrubland Island? Oh, I think that's a Bob? I imagine that's a Bob. Looks like just drew another land. And I think his Sanctuary's in the graveyard. It's a pretty terrible sequence of draws, but he does have the Voidwalker. He does have pressure. And we're going to pump the Bone Man just to get some damage in. Which I think is fair, because Jazz's hand sucks. Oh no, he drew a Death, right? Okay. That's actually a good draw, so he has a Force in hand here. Bob gonna flip Jace or Tameo or something. Definitely a spell. I can't imagine there's any pathways that Brennan would need flip card proxies for. And I mean, there's a lot of pressure here. Deathrite's for 2, Voidwalker's for 3, Bone Man's a 4/4. He has, by the looks of it, a Breach and a Savines, which don't have text. Molten Clap's gonna tag Voidwalker. That's 1 down. His basic island has been pretty awkward this whole game, because now he can't hold up Pyroblast. Going to bin Demonic Council. That card's almost certainly not going to turn on anytime soon. And so Brennan's hand here is Savines, Breach. I think it's a Jace. If it was a Tammy, it would be in play. So it has to be a JVP. And a Pyroblast. I think his life total might be low enough that he's chump blocking this turn. Jazz are going to bin a misstep. Surprised he didn't keep the misstep there. He can hardcast the Force with Deathrite. And this gives him 2 bits of interaction. I mean, I guess if you find a threat that is just better. But it's not incredibly meaningful. I think I like keeping misstep though. Protects your Bone Man from like a plow. And I believe Brennan probably has 1 turn left of combat. Chumping with Bob suggests that his life total might not be low enough that the bones plus the Deathrite would kill him, but if we include a Bob trigger, might have been lethal. Going to develop, again, what I assume is Jace. I can't imagine it's anything else. Which is going to be met by a Consider, which is going to see, I think that's a Dismember. That's probably going to be it, yeah. That's going to be it. Jazz is going to take game 2 here. With an incredibly anemic draw, but the Voidwalker did represent a fair bit of equity there, and it did so much damage. I mean, Brennan didn't have access to clean mana, so he didn't get to cast his spells in the right order. And I'm sure he would have loved to keep the Demonic Council on top of the Surveil, but he would have needed a graveyard for that to matter. It was a very interesting game with how it played out. Like, we tend to think about Grixis as having these really high tempo game-ending threats like Murktide and Psychic Frog. And there, Juzza kind of played a bunch of Watch Wolves and just turned them sideways, and it got there eventually. Pretty crazy. His Drown got countered. He never had a blue card for Force. I don't know if Juzza interacted with Brennan on the stack at any point. I don't think he did. I think every spell that Brennan cast that game resolved. And it was just a matter of not being able to cast spells in quite the right order and not having super clean answers to some of the threats in some spots. And Watchwolves just kind of got there. Brennan going to have the play going into Game 3. Nothing too dramatically has changed. Brennan far more likely to be able to get information out of a discard spell. Looks like he's keeping and Juzza's going to 6. I did see a Brain Freeze in Brennan's hand, so both players effectively on 6. One of the big things about Lurrus Breach is that each of your combo pieces are worth substantially less than a card until you put them all together and it wins the game on the spot. So Dreadfugue, gonna resolve, sees Oculus, Ashok, Deathrite, Wooded Foothills, which can get a Badlands or a Bayou. Thoughtseize, Ledger Shredder. So if Brennan has a clean answer to Deathrite, he might take Thoughtseize here. And if he doesn't, he'll take the Deathrite and just let himself get Thoughtseized. So Brennan's hand makeup pretty crucial. Doesn't look like his hand is amazing. It's like a Reb and a Molten Collapse and stuff. Yeah, he's gonna take the Thoughtseize. So Deathrite just gonna hit the board uncontested by the looks of it. And then he might be Molten Collapsing it for 2 mana. He's got a Brain Freeze, a Red Blast, a Molten Collapse, a Scalding Tarn, and some unknown. Oh, Juzza's playing a Trop, that's good. So it means he doesn't have to get Badlands here. So he has access to blue mana. If the Deathrite lives, he obviously has access to all colors, but if he draws another discard spell, it might be a bit awkward here. And I think Brennan's just signing up to spend 2 mana to kill a 1-drop. Because he really doesn't want to get Thoughtseize there. Steam Vents, pretty big draw. This Shredder's going to be met by a Reb here. So, probably just going to return to parity. And I think he found a Dreams of Steel and Oil, so he can tag a couple of other things. So, the Deathrite going to get exiled. Brennan going to read Stone of Eric here and work out if he wants to take it over Oculus. I mean, the graveyard's really light. I think you can just take stone here. But if you take stone, maybe you have to hold up the Reb for the Oculus. But if you... I mean, he has a Molten Collapse. He can tag this stone on a future turn by cracking a fetch. And so now, if Juzza develops the stone, Brennan can get a 2-for-1 here. If he develops the Ashiok, I guess he just Rebs it. Yeah, Juzza plays Ashiok, you Reb it, you take 1 from the Shredder, and then on a future turn, you tag Shredder plus Stone with Molten Collapse. In the meantime, you just buy Lurrus. Brandon in an unfortunate spot with Molten Collapse where he probably can't crack his fetch to Surveil. Because if he does, he might not be able to descend. But I don't think he has another land to buy Lurrus with, so... I guess we're just cracking and hoping that we can figure it out later. So Juzza with just a stone in hand, Shredder in play. Shredder hasn't triggered yet. Brennan gonna bin a Daze. Finds another fetch, which is good. Means he can turn on the Molten Collapse later. So we're gonna buy Lurrus, we're gonna ship it. Juzza gonna presumably play the stone. What did he find off the top? Was that like a consider? Okay, so we're going to get a Shredder trigger this turn, which at the very least should increase our clock. Gonna play stone and get a Shredder trigger. Now, stone in this matchup is just an overpriced Nihil Spellbomb. It says whenever a creature that your opponent controls dies, exile it instead. That line of text is very minimal, but not 0. But for 2 mana, you can pop it to blow up a graveyard. So yeah, essentially just a graveyard hate piece. And I think by having the stone for other matchups, he might have had to forego something like a Nihil Spellbomb in the sideboard. Although he's probably still playing that. It's probably just like the 3rd piece. And Molten Collapse gonna resolve. Brennan just announcing it and Juzza resigning to put in the graveyard. Brennan gonna crack a fetch and play Lurrus. Does he have a 0 drop? Or is he just shipping it? I don't think he has a 0 drop. Kind of interesting he would expose Lurrus here. Maybe trying to gain some life? So Baragoth. Oh, I think Brennan played Lurrus in case he draws a spell and can brain freeze himself to try and hit Breach. And if that's the line, he presumably needs more mana. Gonna crack a fetch here. I think he's gonna go for something. I think he's just gonna brain freeze himself for 3. At the very least, if he hits any permanent, he'll be able to get a card out of Lurrus. And I mean, the brain freeze is just gonna rot in his hand anyway. So if he's cracking his fetch, he has to be casting brain freeze here. Presumably trying to work out how to actually cast it. Pretty sure it's like Plateau Tundra. So brain freeze, no storm, looking for a permanent. Hits consider, plow, and I think that's a land? Brennan has had a Lurrus in play for 2 turns and has not cast anything with it. And now just gonna have to let this Baraglyph ride? And it's for at least 6. Like an Ashok and a Stone both hit the graveyard. I don't know if an enchantment hit the graveyard, but it's at least 6. So Juz are almost certainly going to get to pick up a card here. No! He misses! Ghost Vacuum, a bunch of spells, and some lands. Alright. I mean, Juz are not being able to deploy a second threat. Oh, he did draw a DHA, and that is super on. Oh, Brennan gonna knock the top of the deck here. It's gonna have to be incredible. Wow, I think he drew Breach. Did he actually draw Breach? Oh my god. Well, if this resolves, presumably we're brain freezing ourselves and trying to hit LED, and then if you hit Council, that gets there. Yeah, that's definitely the single best draw. Maybe Intuition is better. It would be more guaranteed to win the game in this spot. Ultimately, doesn't matter. This game was just kind of absurd. I imagine Juz is dead here. Like, most of the time. I think Brennan's trying to work out if he can shrink the Baraglyph. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure Juz has 6 in his own graveyard. Okay, hits an Urza's Bauble, which does give him an extra spin. Because he can cast Urza's Bauble with Lurrus. Although he is going to cast it with Breach. That's fine. Alright, and here... Yeah, we're gonna cast Bauble with Breach a couple of times here. And then Brain Freeze for the rest of it. And just kind of hope. I mean, Brain Freeze can hit Pedal, can hit LED. He's gonna have to spend the mana for Brain Freeze. So I don't think he can hit Entomb or anything like that. Yeah, I think the odds that Brennan wins the game are very, very high in this spot, but it is super possible to lose the game. And I imagine he's just trying to clean it up as much as possible and quote unquote guarantee it. So he can cast Bauble again. He hasn't cast a spell with Lurrus, so I think he's just announced Bauble with Lurrus there to not exile cards. So I'm going to crack Bauble again. Maybe trying to work out if he can keep the Bolt in graveyard. Alright, so Bauble has now been cast with Lurrus once, and the rest of the times has been cast with Breach. Trying to work out if he cracks the Bauble to exile it to the Breach pay. It's fine. And then we're going to put Brain Freeze on the stack. Oh, he wants to keep the Plow in graveyard, okay. I mean, we're just looking for an LED. Pedal does also get there. Okay. Well, we found LED. That should be it. I think we found only LED. So Brendan's going to be able to Brain Freeze Jazz's library. And this should be it. I mean, Jazz's face up. Gonna count the library to see if Brain Freeze is currently lethal. It's pretty close. I mean, Jazz just milled 6 last turn. But yeah, 2 Brain Freezes will do it here. The notable thing is, and this is a tip for you Lurrus Breach players, the reason why Brennan was counting so aggressively in those early setup turns is that if he decks Jazza, and Jazza has no cards in library, but he has too few cards in his own library, the Urza Bauble draws will cause Brennan to lose the game before Jazza does. So if you Brain Freeze yourself for a bunch, but need to keep casting Bauble for extra Storm, for example, it is possible that you can lose the game. Because the Urza's Bauble draw happens in your opponent's upkeep, and your opponent's draw step is when they would die with no cards in library. And so by counting there, making sure that he gives himself as many opportunities as possible to hit LED off the Brain Freeze targeting himself without exposing himself to dying. And just, losing the game to Bauble for no reason. So GG's. Brennan going to take that 2-1 and advance to the finals, which will be the last match of the POG Winner Library that I'll be doing post-commentary on. So we'll see you then.